Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. As usual, I'm super excited for today's interview. Today's interview is with somebody who has already been on the podcast, though. So for those of you who have been following along since episode 000, you may remember Jeff Ma from episode 1. If you have just tuned in recently and you're like, who's this Jeff Ma character? Definitely go back and listen to that episode. We talk for about 2 hours and he has so many insightful things to share, so many great business lessons. And in episode 1, we really focused on his journey from becoming a yoga teacher to transitioning into a yoga studio owner. And although we touch a little bit on that in this episode, we really dig deeper into the business side of owning a yoga studio and talking about everything from undercutting teachers to teaching for free to how to put value on your offering as a teacher and as a studio owner to how to run a successful studio. So there's lots of great tidbits and wealth of knowledge that's shared by Jeff within this episode. So if you haven't listened to the first episode, I would stop this podcast, go back, listen to episode 1. If you're not sure where to get it, it'll be on the show notes at www.mbomyoga.com. And listen to that episode before you dig into this one, just so you get a little bit more context for Jeff's journey as a teacher. And otherwise, if you're already familiar with Jeff, I hope that you really enjoy this episode. We had such a blast recording it. Jeff is an absolute pleasure to talk to, and I'm so grateful that he's given so much of his time for this podcast to share his information with myself and all of you. So without further ado, here's Jeff. So I've got Jeff Ma back with me today, and I'm super excited to have you on again, Jeff. So thank you so much for doing this again with me.
Totally my pleasure. Right on.
And you are joining me from Canmore, Alberta, correct?
Yeah, you betcha. Canmore, Alberta, about an hour outside of Calgary in the beautiful Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, probably one of my favorite places in the world.
Definitely my favorite place, yeah, for sure.
It's just like so spectacular, the scenery, and I was going to say the weather, but the weather is not actually that spectacular. But the scenery makes it.
Sometimes it's not so spectacular. It's pretty good right now. We've been lucky, but yeah, it's a wild, crazy, awesome place with a lot going for it and a lot of challenges, and it's a very, very interesting place to live.
Yeah, definitely. I've loved all my times that I've lived there, and I think I'll continue like making that a base for home as I continue to roam the world.
Yeah, well, people love you here too, right? So you should come back whenever you feel like you want to come back.
Well, thank you. So we're going to you told your teaching story on episode 1 that you came on last time. So we're going to kind of like skip ahead and not talk about that stuff. So for people who are listening who are like, I don't know anything about Jeff Ma, go check out episode 1. I'll put a link for it in the show notes. It's an awesome episode. I had so much fun recording that with you.
That was a good time. Totally.
Yeah, I think we talked for like 2 hours in the middle of the night.
It was a long one.
That's okay, though. It's good when you're talking about yoga and all things business.
Exactly.
Cool. And I was thinking with this one, we could kind of dive into the idea of like having your personal brand as a yoga teacher and then having a business and combining the two of them and sort of the pros and cons of being a business owner as well as like having your personal brand, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay.
And so I was wondering if you could start with how your teaching sort of changed once you became a studio owner, or if it changed.
I don't know if my teaching necessarily changed. Like, I think one of the great things of being like a studio owner per se is that you have your own home base. And because you have your own home base and you have your own, eventually, hopefully, like committed regular group of students, you can actually go really far. And also because, it's your own studio and it's your own business and it's hopefully a labor of love for yourself. I feel it can really intensify the relationship between the student and teacher in a lot of ways. ways. I remember when I was in Toronto, like way back when, a gentleman I totally look up to, Ron Reed, incredible teacher, and he'd gotten Downward Dog going, and Downward Dog's gone through many arcs. But I remember talking to him, and it's like, what's it like? Because at that point, I was just teaching all over the place. And Ron said something pretty interesting. He's like, there's like so much going on in my life, and I don't think it was until I got a studio, Jeff, that it started to make a little bit more sense for me. And a little bit of background info, Ron's got like a teenage son at the time, and I think for Ron, basically he's like, I just got tired of commuting. He's like, Jeff, I don't want to like take the TTC. I want to fight on the subway. I don't want to like be in the car in traffic and go from point A to point B to point C and just feel like I'm all over the place multiple times a week. And he just felt that he just simplified his life, got down to one place, took the commute essentially down to just one thing, had control of his scheduling to a degree, and that actually gave him a groundwork for some stability, and he built off of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. It's something that, like, when you are teaching at so many different places and spending so much time in your car, that I'm sure a lot of yoga teachers think about, like, it would be nice to just teach regularly at one studio and have like a little bit more stability, especially if you have a family.
Totally. And, in the beginning, it's a blast, right? You feel like a rock star. You're like going everywhere from point A to point B, and you show up to one place and everyone's happy to see you, and like, boom, and then you and hopefully you teach really well, and you establish connection, and then boom, you're off to another place. And, some people love that variety, right? Some people don't want to be like tied down to one place. Some people even, like the challenge of, going into a different place and like cultivating a culture there and cultivating culture in another place. Absolutely. And just kind of thinking back to your question, maybe there's an intelligent sequence and order to this sort of thing. Because I do feel perhaps as a stepping stone, if one is looking to have a successful studio, especially in a place where there's a lot of yoga going on, that it probably does make sense to teach in a lot of different places, build that exposure, learn about working with totally different groups, start to cultivate perhaps a following or getting a sense of what works for you. And then after doing that for a couple of years, then like settling down into a place. Because maybe on the flip side, just opening a studio from ground zero and no one really knows who you are, that can be tough, right? Or maybe you're going to have to rely on other teachers to be a draw or begin the initial sense of energy for a studio. Right. So that's another thought that has crossed my mind too. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely something interesting to think about is like, if you kind of enter the teaching world and you just decide to start a studio, do people come just because it's a yoga studio and you offer things that they like? Or, will you be more successful in your first year or your first 2 years, which is tough. It's tough to own a small business in like the first couple of years of its life. And
oh my God.
I'll take that as agreement.
Oh yeah, we can talk more about that later for sure. And but it also really depends on the situation, and it depends on and place as well. Like we're starting to finishing up an advanced teacher training right now, and it's so fascinating to see like what the various challenges the students contend with. Right? Like I remember we have one student, super lovely. Her name's Georgie. And after like our first module one, she lives in this small town in Alberta. And basically she started offering up some yoga. She actually has to like kind of beat people away from her door because it's never really happened in her community. And people are psyched on yoga. Like yoga's been going on for so long, but they just feel like they've lived outside of the wave. And they're like, oh my God, there's someone here that's teaching yoga. Teach more, teach more, teach more. And so she's like trying to come to terms with that enthusiasm.
Right.
Then you flip side to like another place where someone lives maybe in like a quote unquote mature market where there's a lot of yoga going on. And they probably look at Georgie's problems and they're like, I would love to have that challenge. And for them, it's the total flip side. It's like, how do you get things happening? How do you get the ball rolling? How do you get people to take a chance on you? Et cetera, et cetera. Like, how do you make an opportunity? And right. So one person has like opportunity, like really right there. Another person like trying to like, they're going through like the hard knocks.
Yeah, I can relate to that situation. I remember I did my restorative teacher training like a weekend long in Asheville, North Carolina. So it like drew people from like all over sort of like the southern states. And one girl was saying that she lived in like the middle of North Carolina, and she's like, yeah, I just like started teaching yoga, like offering it out of my basement type thing. And she's like, people are so stoked on it because there's no actual studio. And now she offers like, she's like the only yoga teacher. So she's got all these great offerings and people are like really stoked on it. And I was like, I wonder if like that would be easier entering the teaching world. Like I was just thinking of me coming back from Bali to like Banff and Canmore, which is such a saturated market with a lot of amazing yoga teachers that you just can't really compete with when you're a new teacher. You can learn, but you can't just walk in and be like,
it's definitely a longer process.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder what like the first year of teaching would have been like for her compared to me, just based on like teaching in completely different areas.
Right. Well, I imagine her first year of teaching was a year of like rapid growth, because she probably saw the same audience and saw them multiple times. And it was, she was the one, so she probably wasn't subjected to a lot of comparison to other people, right? And so people could probably cut her a lot of slack and gave her a lot of trust right off the get-go. Like she didn't have to come in and necessarily like prove herself or be compared to like, this teacher or that teacher. She was the teacher, and good for her.
Yeah, I was like, oh,
totally good for her.
I felt like a little pang of like jealousy. I was like, oh, maybe I should have like moved to a small town in like interior British Columbia where there's like nobody offering yoga, and just like started there.
Yeah, well, even interior BC, I think that's getting pretty cool. We're talking like, we're getting to the point like certain parts of northern Alberta. Maybe, yeah, like we're
I'm just going to move to the Yukon
now. Yeah, exactly. Well, the Yukon is actually pretty competitive. But like outside of the Yukon, like, you go to like, I don't know a lot about what's happening, say like way up in the north to like places like Iqaluit and like Tuktoyaktuk. There's probably not a ton of yoga right there.
Maybe that's the place for new yoga teachers.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's other places too, but yeah, it's a totally different vibe. And having said that, though, if someone's kind of going through in a very saturated, condensed market, and they're willing to stick it out, which is obviously a personal challenge for everyone, that they have to make their own comfort level to decide. I think a lot of times the cream does rise to the top there too. But it can be a long road for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious on your opinion as like a studio owner in a small area. Like, so I think that one of the like most obvious business things, so say you're a newer teacher, so you can't offer the experience, but maybe you can come in and you can offer like a cheaper price. Like, so you could do yoga in like a rented space or in a park or out of your home, and you could offer like less than the yoga studio does. So if there's like a teacher who came in with less experience and they offered like, drop-ins for like $10 to $15, which is like a little bit less than what the yoga lounge charges. What are your sort of like, what's your opinion on that as like a studio owner in a small town?
Well, like, I guess it just depends if people go or not. I think it also probably depends on what sort of pricing people are coming to. And this kind of opens up a whole other can of worms. Like when I studied with my teacher, Hart Laser, one of the biggest, most profound things he had from one of his early teachings was like, he was in this training, and I think it's his first one. And like, and he's looking around the room, and there's all these people that are, being trained to become teachers. And the woman that was leading the training, she's quite a wealthy woman. Like, she's quite established in the community, and probably had the space and the time that she didn't have to like worry about, income per se. She could just learn yoga, and then she was paying it forward, teaching all these other people with the hope of them, spreading the seeds of yoga. And she actually found out that people were starting to teach for free, right? And she was so upset about that. Right. And I've never met this woman, but I deeply respect her, because that woman pulled all those people aside from that teacher training and just kind of said, like, I'm hearing some of you guys are teaching for free, and that just doesn't work, guys. Like, yeah, like maybe some of you guys can afford to teach for free, But there's going to be some other people out there that are going to want to make this their livelihood. And they're still going to be great teachers. And if we set up this culture of this situation where it's not viable, this practice dies here. And that was pretty interesting. And so I feel yoga is such an awesome thing that a race to the bottom, like a race to zero, is in the grand scheme of things not so good. Just like when I was talking to my teacher, Hart Laser, like one of the big codes of conduct he really felt was that, undercutting another teacher is not that great of a thing. I know it happens. Like, we don't endorse at the Yoga Lounge, but it probably happens in the big cities where, teacher X is trying to break into the thing. And they're like, well, what are you paying that teacher? Oh, well, I'll do it for like $20 less. Or I'll do it for $10 less. And same thing, like if the studio owner is not scrupulous, or maybe they don't really see the big picture of it. And then what happens is, oh yeah, well, I don't know why I should pay you because this other person, sure, they're not as experienced, but they're willing to do it for like half price and blah, blah, blah. And before we know it, it doesn't take very many years before the tradition starts to die. Mm-hmm. Okay? No one can afford to do it. No one can really, get ahead doing it. No one can even like live doing it if we go that way. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, and So I've got some strong thoughts about it. If someone that wants to do their own thing, it's a free world, and they're welcome to like do that. Is it a sustainable model for a long term, in terms of their own personal practice, their own personal experience, and even for the bigger idea of like where this yoga is going? Those are some questions I think we all have to like probably spend a little bit more time thinking about.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. That's a good point to bring up, is like, kind of like, what's your long game, I guess? Like,
the long game is huge. Like case in point, you ever been to a naturopath before?
I have been to a naturopath. I've been to a couple naturopaths.
Yeah. And what's a common thing amongst all naturopaths?
I've been to a variety of different ones, and there's only one that I like really like, and I really do like her. I kind of swear by her. But
sure, and okay, keep going.
I was gonna say, I did go to like the crazy lady in like Kensington and Calgary, and she did something.
No names.
I don't even remember her name, but she did something crazy with her hands with my belly, and then gave me some like pills that were not in English, and I was like, I don't know about that. That was a bit kooky.
Right, but like the interesting common thing among naturopathy is they were probably all expensive to see. It's really interesting. Naturopaths as a group seem to have kind of this, I don't know if this is like in the rule book or it's like the unspoken thing within the code that, hey guys, we are all naturopaths and we have like esteemed specialized knowledge and we are good at what we do and we offer an alternative to say like allopathic Western medicine. And you know what? We are going to price ourselves at this price point, and let's just all stick to that. And gosh, man, like
that's a good point.
It seems to work for the naturopathy world, right? And it's super fascinating. Whereas, like in the yoga world, I would actually like to see a little bit more of that. I'm not saying we price ourselves like naturopaths, but just a sort of like common sense of like, hey, what we do does have value. If we do this well, it can have like a huge impact on people's lives. I've seen it have huge impact on people's lives. So why don't we value ourselves? And I don't know how they got to that price point. It's like maybe like naturopath X comes in, they try and undercut everybody else. Everybody else just kind of like leans on them like the mafia or what? That, in a lot of ways, naturopathy, in like our allopathic medicine, Western medicine driven society has like managed to flourish. And I think one of the big reasons why it's managed to flourish is that, they've set at a price point that a lot of the practitioners can actually sustain and continue doing it. Right. So fascinating.
Yeah,
and then the other thing too is, and there's also this human nature thing too. If something's like, and this is human psychology, right? If people see something as being valued at a certain point, this is what it costs. And like, there's often an inference that like, oh, that must be good, right? Yeah. Whereas if something's like set off like really, really cheap, it can be on the flip side where it's like, oh, well, how good can it be, right? It's only like $5 a class, or like, how can it be? And then down the road, it's like, there's this mental stigma that kicks in where like, oh yeah, yoga, that's that thing where it's like only worth $5.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, whoa. And that is not, in my humble opinion, like a long-term strategy for success for yoga to continue in our world, right? Like, some of us are really highly trained and we bring a lot. And I think, we deserve to be compensated for that.
And teacher trainings are not cheap. Like, the education to be a yoga teacher it's not a cheap thing.
No. Like, it's not as expensive like as other things to learn, but you know what? It's definitely not an insignificant investment.
Right.
Absolutely. Like, for sure.
Yeah. It's a topic that I've covered with like a ton of different yoga teachers on the podcast. And I think it's interesting because everyone kind of has their own sort of opinion on like teaching for free. And I've thought a lot about my opinion as well, because like, as somebody who is in like the first couple of years of teaching, I've taught a lot for free. And I think that there's two sides to it. There's like, I notice if it's a free class or like a class that people don't have to pay for, they're not expected to donate. It seems like they don't value the teaching as much. And when you go into that situation as a teacher, it's hard to like, for me, it's like hard to motivate myself to sit down beforehand and really spend like a ton of time on my sequence when I'm like, well, the last time I taught this, there was people like talking in the back and like, like that's not very respectful to the teacher. And then it's like, I could just teach the sequence that I've taught, at 6 other different classes. That's kind of already in my brain. Sure. And it's like, pretty easy to teach type thing. And so it's thinking about it from both points of view. Like, if I know somebody's paying $19 to come to that class and I'm being compensated however much for my time, it's like, I'm going to put my time and effort into it, and they show up because they want to be there and they valued it as $19.
Exactly. Right. Like, I think a real interesting parallel to what's happening to the yoga world is like CrossFit. Like, I think CrossFit has done a tremendous job of like proving its value. And also CrossFit has like done a tremendous job of like holding true to say like, this is what we're worth. And it's super fascinating. Like, you go, granted, like the teaching format's a little bit different. Like, say if you go to like a CrossFit gym, there's probably like only a finite number of spaces depending on the size of the place. Whereas maybe like in a yoga studio, you might have a little bit more space. But you go to CrossFit place and like pretty much every like CrossFit place, their drop-in is high. Like, say their drop-in price compared to like a drop-in to like what a yoga studio would be, like way high, like crazy high. And you know what? And they unabashedly say, yeah, this is what it is. We work hard. We got something that's worth you to check out. We're a lot of them are trained, and this is what it is. And so people hold in a lot of places CrossFit in higher esteem than yoga, which I think is really bonkers. Not knocking CrossFit. I'm just saying, like, why is yoga as a movement, as a pathway of knowledge being undervalued by the very people presenting it? Such interesting stuff there.
Do you think it has to do with sort of the yogic background, like where yoga comes from and like the spiritual context? Yeah,
it could possibly be. But, having said that, like I've been to India and like I've studied with Patabi Joyce and well, definitely after the Western handlers got their claws into him, like he had no idea. He had no qualms about charging what he thought he was worth.
Right.
Right. And, hey, like, and having said that, that poor guy, like he lived in squalor for the longest time. And so, and obviously he also lived at the intersection of like culture change where he lived in the old India and then all of a sudden there's like affluence coming his way. It's super fascinating. Like, if you want to be like a sadhu and have the teachings for free, well, expect to live a very different life.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing too, I feel, and I don't know if this is perhaps that there's a certain subset of culture that is drawn towards yoga where they just have like an uncomfortable relationship with money. Super fascinating. They have an uncomfortable relationship with, and like, what is money but like another form of energy, right? But to have like a discomfort with that, or like worse yet, to have like a sense of like distaste towards it or aversion to it, that probably has part of it. Like I know there's people that probably feel guilt, right? For like, well, I do what I love. I'm teaching what I love, and it's brought me so much joy. I feel guilty charging for it. Well, good luck with that if you're going to keep doing this. But yeah, so there's some personalities, there's some personal values that I think a lot of yoga teachers could do well to explore. Big time. Like, it's really weird when I run into people that have they find like economics is a distasteful thing. You know what? Everything's yoga. Economics is part of that, and we all settle in on our scale. Like, I live a good life, but I do not live like a lavish lifestyle. But I've also made sure that, hey, I've got a long game to play here. Like, I want to keep teaching. I love teaching. I have a family. I've got 2 girls that I want to like support, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I want to like show up at the studio knowing that, what I do is valued, so that I can feel that that's not even in the background of my mind anymore. Right. Like, when the studio is rocking and like, I feel I'm doing well, then it's like perfect. The teaching is so much cleaner. If it goes on the flip side and it's like, blah, 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 we're like, fighting to keep the lights on and it's like hand to mouth, month to month. Like, how is this going to happen? And blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, I don't know about you, but like, I just do not teach nearly as well in that situation. So.
Well, it's stressful. It's stressful when you're like thinking about, I need to teach this class so that I can like continue paying for my electricity. Like, or I need to teach this and take this money that I'm earning right now so that I can go get groceries. Like that.
Totally. Right?
And I feel like students feed off that type of energy, like in the room when it's almost like you're teaching out of desperation instead of enjoyment.
Yeah. Or like they can tell you're phoning it in, or they can tell, like people, like we're teaching yoga. Right. And so if we're teaching this well, like our students, their sense of receptivity and connection should be heightened. And so if we're coming in on the wrong frequencies, like people pick that up right away. Or like whether it's like, totally in their face or subconsciously they pick up on it, they pick up on it. Yeah. And like on the flip side too, like I would feel like studios should have over time students that want the place to thrive. Right. It's like, if I feel if the students do not value what is being offered, they're trying to like, chisel the studio, and then the studio owners are, putting out at a price point what they feel is fair value, then that is not a recipe for success. Like that is a culture that will implode.
Right.
And then I would question like how much yoga is really happening there. Yeah.
So as a studio owner, what are some of your practices like to prevent that from happening?
To prevent what from happening? Like
the studio kind of from like imploding and, I guess that's kind of a big question.
Yeah.
But just in the way of like students appreciating the prices that you're offering and teachers feeling like comfortable with the amount of money they're making, like kind of keeping that balance.
Right. Well, like for myself, like, I'm talking from a place of experience, and, I like the positions that I'm talking about right now, I did not hold those positions back in the day. I was more naive. I was more like, I would have felt the guilt, or I would have felt the sense of like, well, what is this worth? Or like, maybe, maybe we shouldn't really be charging that. And then, and then this is one of the great mantles and challenges that, like, say, a studio owner or even someone who's like a personal teacher trying to build their brand is like, when are you going to value yourself? Mm-hmm. And so for myself, that happened in gradual degrees, right? And you also have to look at the situation. Like when we took over the yoga lounge, like Hillary and I, 5 years ago, the studio started in 2002, right? And so we took it over around like the 9-10 year mark. And at that point, right, in prior, the studio had been run with more of like the typified mindset we were talking about. So honestly, that studio was in decline, right? Like the writing was on the wall. It was going down, right? Was it going to implode instantaneously? No, but as a long-term plan, it wasn't going to be around. And so we came in and we're like, holy cow. And so we started off and we did not change pricing radically right off the get-go, because there was a culture of the studio. And so what we did instead is we came in, we infused a ton of energy into it, right? Mm-hmm. Super passionate, that whole, building the relationships with the students. And then from there, as the relationship strengthened and the studio started to turn around, and then they'd say, okay, people are starting to see value, because, we have to build their trust too. I think it would have been a little bit cocky to just come in, new owners, and then, whoa, everything went up by blah, blah, blah. I just don't think that's fair, because you're not a proven entity. But, after a while, it's okay, well, this is what's happening. And it's well, I would like to, make this more viable. Like that plan we just did for the first year or two, that worked for the first year or two, but long term, it's not going to work. And so then we just gradually started to venture into that crazy question: what are we worth, right? And then, well, if we are worth X, are we actually delivering that value? Are we delivering more, right? So that we can unabashedly say, this is what it costs to study with us, and people see it and they're like, yeah, that's fair, and away you go. But it takes time to build the confidence to step up and say what you're worth. I think some people, it takes years. Some people will never come to terms to have the courage to say what they're worth. Some people, and these people, I find them so fascinating. Right off the get-go, they know what they're worth, and they say it. And you know what? A lot of times, they just do fine. It's so interesting. Yeah. It's so interesting, right? If you unabashedly, this is what I'm worth, and I will deliver on that, and that's it. And people are like, no doubt, away you go, right? But
I guess if you can be confident
it's a gradual process. Yeah. And the relationships that you have with your students are strong, and they value you. Mm-hmm. That definitely makes it a lot easier, for sure. It definitely makes it a lot easier. Yeah. But, that was and I remember every time, we went through these things where, at the most basic, it's hey, maybe we're going to change the pricing of the studio from a drop in price of this to a drop in price of that. It's nail biting. Oh my God, how's this going to work? How are we going to be perceived? And, if you make a shift in pricing that is still reflective of fair value, what it is that you offer, and you're committed to deliver on that, it's all good.
Yeah. I think that's key. Right? Are we delivering on that? What are we giving you for your money?
Yeah, exactly. Are we, and they're how are we supporting this relationship? And if people see that, it's good. And you know what? Maybe you'll run into some people that are well, you know what? Well, I don't think that's worth it. And from there, you can have a conversation with them or in your mind. Say, okay, are we pushing the envelope a little too hard? Is this someone that just is not really, going to support us in our long-term thing? So, maybe this is where our paths diverge. Or maybe this is someone that we just need to reach out and help with on an individual basis, right? Mm-hmm. Say at the yoga lounge, we've moved forward and we've done stuff where, pricing has shifted or something shifted. And, there have been some folks that are oh, well, blah, 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 blah. Where's the sale? Or when's the blah, blah, blah. And I'm just you know what? We don't do sales, right? And maybe you are the perfect fit for us and what you're looking for. And maybe you've been getting way too much value from us. You have to go see something that's not as good at the price point you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And see ya. But then on the flip side, we've had people that, if they're genuinely challenged, hey, let's sort it out. At the lounge, we have a whole selection of folks that are, paying far, we subsidize them, we help them. Maybe they've lost their job, or maybe there's crazy stuff going on in their family, or maybe they're on our karma team, so we have an exchange with them. There's lots of ways to make sure people don't fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Yeah, but still making sure that you're valuing yourself while delivering on that. Yeah, it makes me think about, I remember talking to, when I was down in Atlanta, I hired a personal coach or a life coach or a business coach, I guess essentially is what he was. I remember him telling me that he was like, it took me a long time to be comfortable with like, this is how much I charge. And it's like a conversation that has to happen in the very first like intro call that he does for free to see if you're like a good fit. And he said one guy was like, well, that's out of my budget. And he's like, okay, well, like, what's your budget? Or like, what do you value this as? And he's like, I'm willing to pay $40 a month. And he was like, well, I value myself as higher than that. So he's like, unfortunately, we can't like proceed with this. And I thought that that was a really interesting way of thinking about that and then translating it into like, whether it's private yoga or owning a yoga studio or just any business in general, to be like, you have like a low point and a max point and the point that you normally offer, and you'll like negotiate within that, but knowing that you're worth so much, right? Like he doesn't want that client if that client's not going to value him for what he's delivering.
Exactly. And, you know, and like a lot of times, you know, like when I have these conversations with folks, like, you know, in the back of my mind, I also have, and like for better or worse, I kind of have like a bit of like a moral compass or like a value compass, right? So if someone's like coming up to me, and this doesn't really happen that much anymore, probably because I do not give off like the opportunity for this to happen. But like if someone's looking to say, oh, you know, like this is really expensive for me, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, you know, like every single night, you know, they're out at the bar or like, you know, they're like, you know, they can totally buy like another 6-pack of beer or, you know, they love to smoke cigarettes or whatever. Or, hey, they have no problem, you know, they paid for their ski pass at the ski hill. That costs $1,400. So basically there's other things that you value more than this. So you're just cheap, right? Or you're just working the system, right? And so then it's like, hey, you know what? Like, it's obviously, you know, we're not a fit, right? Yeah. I hope down the road we'll be a fit. But, you know, if you're like, if you can happily blow like, you know, $200 a month on partying and you don't want to like spend X for yoga, well, keep on partying. Whatever, and if there's a time in your life where there's a different value subset, then I bet you we could work together again. But I'm not here to subsidize that.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting thing.
Like I want to help people that really, you know, are in a situation that like need to be helped or want to be helped, big time, right? Totally.
But they value yoga in general. Like they value their practice and like or they're willing to like exchange or something, right? Totally. So. So you mentioned like a while back that like Ron Reed kind of gave you some like insight into what owning a studio was like. When you and Hillary decided to buy the yoga lounge or to take over the yoga lounge, was it because you were looking for more stability?
Well, this is that whole thing of folks who are like from the Calgary yoga scene, like some folks might be familiar with that history, and we kind of covered a little bit in that the first talk we had. Yeah. You know, we were part owners of a studio in Calgary. And then like that imploded and basically, you know, by then I was like, you know, I've run studios before and I can do this awesome. And I really like the flavor of running a studio. And only this time I'm not going to work with like people I don't like or people that are like different. And I liked them in the beginning, but after a while you get to know somebody and you're like, this is not a fit. And so we were actively looking for like another opportunity. And we were fortunate. And so we got approached to take over the studio in Canmore. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And did you find that taking that over gave you that stability? Like what sort of changed for you personally?
Oh, well, it didn't. It could have been a pathway to stability, but at the time when we took over the yoga lounge, you know, like I said before, like the studio was in decline, and you know, and nothing's a sure thing. So I don't think stability would have been the answer. But you know, the funny thing at that time was that Hillary was still in school, and we just had this full on like calamity with like the prior studio. We'd gone through like the legal battle, and we came out through that, and like we won. And at the same time, you know what? Hillary was pregnant. Yeah. So full on game changer situation where it's like, here we are. I have a little person coming. Right. My wife's still in school. We're going to make this work.
I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are like, holy shit, you have a wife in school, you have a kid on the way, you just got through a legal battle, and you've just bought a business that's like...
Well, to
maybe
give you
not doing full, great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so to give you the full context, like what happened was, like, we thought that when we bought the studio, we would be like a gradual takeover.
Oh,
where
okay. Yeah.
the prior owner would like carry it forth for a chunk of time just so that we could get our lives sorted out. And it just became apparent that if we took it on that strategy, there'd be nothing to take over at that point.
Right.
And so we had to make a tough call. So, prior owner, clearly they're checked out. It's time for us to check in. And that's fair, right? Because the prior owner had gone through a lot and had done an amazing job, that she was probably ready to move in her new life direction. So it didn't make sense for her to be kind of like 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future. So it's like, holy crap, we got to take this over like 4 months earlier. So we go up to Canmore from Calgary. And we kind of looked around and it's like, this is bonkers. Like, I'm not going to have we can't like just be renting a basement suite and maybe asked to move, right, in like a couple months with like a new kid. So then right away it was like, I guess we gotta like maybe buy a place. And so then I remember like Hillary and I, she was like super pregnant. We drove out to Canmore one weekend with a realtor, looked at 5 places, made the call. And so basically what happens in a span of 5 weeks, we packed up our place in Calgary, we moved, we took full control of the studio, and we had Clara. That all happened in 5 weeks. Like, I have no idea how I lived, like how I survived. But it was a crazy time. Like, those are all stressful things, like moving, buying a house, taking a business over, having your first kid, like all like crazy wild things. And to have it happen in like a span of 5 weeks was, but if you believe that, you're not given anything you can't handle, and you like fervently believe that even in the darkest times, then you make it through.
Yeah. I guess there's also like, there's a lot of like great stuff within that too. It's just like, you probably want to separate like owning your business and like celebrating that and like dealing with the ups and downs of that, and like having your first child and dealing with sleepless nights kind of separately.
Oh yeah, like for sure. Like we're like 5 years in at this place, because we ran through for 5 years, and there's still like boxes in the basement that haven't been unpacked from that move 5 years ago. Right? So,
maybe when the girls like go off to university.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but yeah, it was a wild, crazy time. But if there's ever if you have the wherewithal and the drive and the motivation, where it's internal or external motivations, and I feel if you're practicing yoga in such a way that your yoga practice is strengthening your moral resolve, and yoga practice is opening into being vulnerable and truthful for what you're dealing with, that you're just being your practice is just being tested at a really high level, and hopefully you get to that point where you realize that the surest bet is betting on yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like knowing that you can like trust yourself because you've like put the work in.
Yeah, and especially if you feel that what you're doing is like on your purpose. Like for myself, like, owning a studio is like a huge part of my life's purpose, right? Because like I've done it before when I was in Calgary, and that was the reason why I was like moved in this direction. And so I was like, this is like life's purpose. I would wonder if someone is just getting a studio not with like life purpose as like reason number one, but as like, oh well, this sounds like a good way to make money, or this sounds like which is a fallacy. Like, I don't know if that. Well, not a fallacy, not a given, but I don't know if it would be as successful. It might not happen, right? But if it's something that you feel intensely compelled to do, and you're ready to take on like studio ownership and the 5 kajillion things that come with it, and you're happy to take those things on, or you're happy to see those things through, and you're on your path, because like studio ownership's not everyone's path, but if you're on your path, that's definitely like a huge step forward in the likelihood of things working out.
Yeah.
That's probably why a lot of studios don't work out in the end, because it's actually, despite the various intentions of people running them, it might not be their absolute path.
Yeah. And I think it's cool when people like try that and they see if it is. Like, I think you have to kind of like live and learn sometimes to figure out what you actually want to be doing.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also like check out the motives behind it, right? Like the motives behind, and obviously motives. There's a whole wide ranging of reasons why any of us do anything, and just be brutally honest with oneself. Like, what are my reasons for doing this? And then kind of stack them up to like what it is that we're trying to do, and away you go.
Right.
There's stability. But what are some other reasons why I wanted to run a yoga studio? I wanted to put myself in a situation where I grew as a person, where I had to learn skills outside of my regular skill set. I wanted to be in a situation where teaching, I could cultivate meaningful long-term relationships with students. And like by long-term, I'm talking like multiple years, so that, they could go far, and I myself as a teacher could be challenged to continue to go further. There's people where their first reason to run a studio is because they think it'll make money. And if you're coming in with that as like reason number one, I don't know, man. Like, it should be a reason, I think, amongst the list of reasons. But if that's like reason number one, I don't know. I would probably say level of success there will not be the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. It's kind of interesting. Like, it seems like getting clear on like what your intentions are is definitely, or what your motives are is definitely like a good way to go about figuring out what you want to do. And I think there's a lot of maybe like guilt or maybe even shame in sort of like the yoga industry, because people feel like they're expected to do certain things. Like even people who don't want to teach like full time are like, oh, well, I should teach full time. Or people who do a teacher training who then come out and are like, I actually don't want to teach, but like, I feel like I should, like, I feel guilty for not wanting this. And so they kind of go in that direction anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another fascinating thing. Cause guilt is a useless emotion.
Oh yeah. It does like nothing to benefit anyone.
Yeah. Like if someone is like living in guilt or living in worry, there's some other work that they could totally, move towards, and starting to understand why they feel guilt and understand why they feel worry, and really start to like work on that stuff. And that would be like a huge benefit to their lives. So like if your yoga practice leads you to situations of guilt, you don't need to feel guilty about feeling guilty, but definitely start looking at like, why is it that I feel guilt? And is this something that I can work with and learn from? Because man, if you can start to like understand guilt, work away from guilt, resolve guilt, same thing with worry, which is like another close cousin to guilt, your life will move forward significantly.
Yeah.
Big time. Big time.
I think it's really important to analyze like what you kind of want out of your life and be like really honest with that and know that it's like, okay, whatever you choose. Like if you don't want to teach, don't teach. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to own a studio, don't invest your time and money into doing that.
Yeah. Because it will be gone. Your time and your money in significant amounts. But like, it's kind of interesting. I don't know where that comes from. If it comes from like the people teaching the teachers, or if that's just personal stuff. Probably a mix.
I think it might be like kind of an innately human thing, and like we see it really clearly in the yoga industry. Yeah,
for sure.
Because I think it happens in other industries as well. Like, people feel like they should do things like having a business degree. I was like, oh, I should get like a corporate job. Like I should probably put like my parents' money for this degree to good use. Yeah. And then I felt so guilty when I hated it. Like I was like, what's wrong with me? Yeah. Like there's something wrong. There has to be something wrong.
All that time wasted. Or and I think maybe that's also part. I think this is just part of growing up, like I remember like when I did not come out of high school with the intention of being a yoga teacher. Like I went to university, right? And I got that mechanical engineering degree and I hated it. And I did it for like 5 years. And I remember being racked with guilt and all sorts of things when I left that thing. And, but then, that was like a huge learning point. And then like the guilt disappeared once I learned to start valuing myself more than what like I thought other people thought about me, which is where a lot of guilt comes from.
Yeah, totally. Definitely. Right? It's like it's a good thing to like dig into and kind of like understand your own psyche. Totally.
Yeah. Like if someone takes a yoga teacher training and then they get exposure to some sort of guilt piece, and that's a signpost for them to resolve that. That is massive value. That is massive value in their lives. Big time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So I'm curious, you kind of like touched on it before. about saying how you really wanted to build like longer term relationships with students. Would you say that you've gotten that a lot more as a studio owner than you did teaching at like multiple studios in the city?
I think, well, like when I was teaching, what's interesting, right? When I was teaching multiple locations, I could still build relationships for sure, because like so many of those students actually come out to like see us in Canmore. Like I'm so flattered and like honored, when someone, does a 200-kilometer round trip from Calgary to come to class with me on the weekend. They're not just coming for me. Like sometimes they are, but sometimes they're coming to go for a hike or they're going to do something out in the mountains. Like, hey, we should go like touch base with Jeff. And so there clearly was a relationship that was built at that time. And I'm deeply honored that people want to continue it. So you can build relationship. But if you have like one place and you're teaching at it all the time at a certain amount, and you don't have to be a studio owner to be in the situation where you're teaching at one place a lot for like a steady amount. You can really build some deep, deep relationships. And I love it, right? Like yoga is about relationship, and to see someone through like the arc of their practice, and they can see you for the arc of your teaching, and just to build and grow and all that, that's super fascinating. Right? That's super fascinating. So being a studio owner can help, but I don't think it's a necessary thing. Being consistent would really help to build a relationship, for sure.
Right. So sticking to like kind of the same city or the same studios and teaching like consistently same times.
Totally. Like if you look at it like in a microcosmic way at the Yoga Lounge, like the teachers that are the most successful in terms of like cultivating relationships or having, and like, cultivated relationships manifest in a lot of ways. You could look at it as attendance. You could look at it as like return visits. You could look at it as like following across different time slots. Basically what happens is they revere their teaching. It's like, you know what? This is my time slot. I've got the privilege of teaching this time slot. I'm not going to like sub it out, 2 times out of every 5 times I teach it. I'm going to like grow this thing, and it's going to be my time. And like the teachers that take those time slots, whatever time slot it is, and respect it and continue with it, you just see the relationship flourish, right? Like people, it's like case in point. A couple years back, we had someone within our student community take a teacher training. And I know she was kind of hesitant, but I was like, I saw potential in her. So I reached out. I'm like, Elisa, I want you to teach. And she's like, I don't know if I'm ready, And like she had to overcome a lot. Like she is not born in Canada. She's from Italy. She has an accent. She's teaching in not her native tongue. Yeah. Right? And I was like, Elisa, I believe in you. I'm not going to put you in a prime time slot because I don't have any of those to give. But what do you think about, like, you want to take over the early morning program? Like, Hillary's been teaching early morning, so she's pregnant with her second kid. And you know what? I think this is right place, right time. And she's like, what time is it? 6:30 in the morning. And her, like, eyeballs are like, whoa, 6:30 in the morning? Like, I worked, like, a kick-ass job at, like, one of the most popular high-end restaurants in Canmore. It's like, I don't like finish up till like 1 or 2 in the morning sometimes. Like on Thursday night, and you want me to teach Friday morning 6:30? And she kind of like, I was like, yeah, because I think you could do it. And I don't think she even asked the question. I think she heard it and saw the opportunity, and after like a little bit of like hemming and hawing, like decided to do it. And she is stuck with that thing in and out. Snowstorms, late nights, she's there. Yeah. 6:30 in the morning. 6:30, and in the beginning there'd be like a couple people that came to that class, but because they knew that she would always be there, they kept coming, and then like other people would come, and within like a span of like a year and a half, 2 years, like she has taken our 6:30 morning slot from something that was kind of like a bit of a ho hum, sort of like we offer this time slot as like a service to some of our members, to something that is like a meaningful. For a lot of people, this is when they come. Yeah. And I'm so proud of her. Like, because I see the relationships she's cultivated with those early morning folks. And those early morning people love seeing her. And she's grown like massively as a teacher because of that experience. And the students themselves, because they've had this consistency, right? They've grown as well. She just gets it. It's like, this is like sacred, the chance to teach, and I'm going to be consistent, and I'm going to do it. Like, so now we have like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6:30 in the morning, and she does all three, and she rocks it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
so
interesting because
yeah.
I remember going to that class, like when Ryan dragged me there. I don't really like getting up that early, but
yeah, I wouldn't teach it.
I taught a consistent 6
not my
a.m. once a week for like 9 months, and it was amazing, but it was challenging. Like, there's pros and cons with that. But I remember going and like when we moved there in 2014, and it would be like really small classes. And I went this past summer, and I could like barely find a spot to put my mat. I was like, there's so many people here. Like, it's like 6:20 in the morning. Yeah. What are all these people doing awake? Yeah.
They're awake because they know that Elisa is there to be with them.
Totally.
Ready to rock.
Yeah, no, it was amazing to see.
Yeah, like she had built the trust of so many. Like, I'm immensely proud of her. So.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
Yeah. Right. So,
I'd love to hear about like the challenges of like the first couple of years of owning a yoga studio. Like we kind of touched on like prices and like building trust with your students. What other challenges did you guys face in the first couple of years with the studio?
Okay. Wow, that's like another like whole podcast in itself. Okay, there was a time, and I had to come to this harsh realization a couple years ago. There was a time when I thought that if I just, as a studio owner, that if I just taught really great classes, if I taught really great classes and cared for my students by like teaching well, everything else would take care of itself. That strategy works only to a certain point. It will only take you to a certain point. And, it definitely only took me it took me pretty far, but there came a point where it's just like, you know what? Whoa, this strategy has like a ceiling. And it got exposed because what happens is like we had some like big like outside studio issues we're dealing with where like the town had a community center that was kind of running rampant and just expanding their program to try and close every private fitness business that was in Canmore. But it doesn't matter what the conflict or the challenge was. It was like it brought in like blinding lights to my like ignorant face. You know what, Jeff? Just because you're teaching fantastically, it's not enough. And at that point, I had this huge revelation, or I was like really scared that like I actually have to learn like how to run a business. And so there comes this point, right? Like if you want to learn how to run a business, right, you have to start surrounding yourself with good people, right? And so you can't do everything by yourself. So because at that point, we were doing it all. Like I was doing the graphic design, I was doing the website, I was, doing the scheduling, I was doing the hiring, I was doing the cleaning, I was doing like all of it, right? And so we had to make that leap of faith where it's like, you know what, like you can't do it all. We got to like hire some people. Can we afford it? I don't know, but then we got to, right? And then it's like now we actually have to learn some actual business acumen. So not only surrounding yourself with good people, but it's like get some business skills. And that is such a fascinating word, like business skills. What does that mean? Right? Well, that can mean a lot of things. That depends on everyone, right? It could be like stuff from as simple as like budgeting, right? Forecasting, advertising. These are all like, separate things that people need to learn. You should be taking a look at like optimizing and learning how to work smarter, not harder. So there's like methodology and philosophy there. You should be looking at your software and your systems and actually really leveraging them and using them so that they actually help you. You should be looking at, your big picture. How do you price? Right. So I remember like all this stuff happened. Right. And, it was just, okay, got to learn. Okay. I'm not doing too bad of a job as a teacher, but I got to learn how to run a business now. And like, not the kind of business that like kind of scrabbles along, barely kind of limping along, but the kind of business is actually sustainable. And so there's a whole whack of stuff. Yeah. And like, case in point, like one of the best things we did was like, we actually took our software and started to leverage it. You know, like, I'm sure like if there are people on this phone call in the MBO world, I'm sure like 80% of the people listening, that they're familiar with Mind Body Online, right? Whether they use it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Or, you know, because like Mind Body Online, you know, love it or hate it, is the industry standard. And that's what it is. And like, I remember like Mind Body Online, like I know enough to kind of use it that I spend a lot of money on it every month. Maybe it's time to like step it up. And, so like, you know, went to Mind Body University, you know, kind of like shelled out a bunch of cash, flew in to like Vancouver, sat in for like a multi-day course, and was blown away about like everything that I was doing wrong, right? And then came back and started to change it. I think other things that really helped as a business owner was like actually like looking to like people that I knew and talking to them, look at other people that are successful and touch base. And like, why reinvent the wheel? Like, ask someone else, like, hey, like, what's going on? Like how are you guys seeing success with this? What's happening? And it doesn't have to be people that are necessarily like another yoga business, right? It could be someone that runs another type of business that's like similar, and just getting some insight as well. Like, those were all big things. Like, yeah, essentially getting help. And, you know, then also knowing who to ask for help. You know, like, I think it's pretty, like, you know, like, I think it's pretty freaking naive to, if you live in a small market, right, to, like, ask someone that does the exact same thing in your market to, like, tell you how to do business. I think that's kind of stupid. It's like, well, you know, just put yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, can you like teach me like everything you do that you're successful so that I can compete aggressively with you? Right. No, that's just not cool. Like, so, you know, like I would like touch base with friends in Calgary. Right? I was like, hey, you know, like you're in Calgary, I'm in Canmore, and there's like 100 kilometers between the two of us. Like, what are you guys doing that's like working? Right. And so I talked to like people I knew in the studio community there. Or if like I was talking to people in Canmore, I'd be talking to folks that like, you know, were like in something totally different, like CrossFit or Pilates or whatever. Like, hey, like, you know, you serve like a different community than what we serve. What's been helping you? Mm-hmm. And getting in on that. Also, committing to learning, right? And by learning, it's like, take a look at how much learning you do from your yoga side and then start ramping up your business learning. And there's a ton of like amazing free resources that you can start looking on the web to learn about business. And not even just learn about business mindset. Like, and so all of a sudden I found myself like, you know, subscribing to these like newsletters or these various like online like business guru people, Marie Forleo, Jeff Walker, Robin Sharma, like Tim Ferriss, like there's a whole bunch of people that you can check in on. And I was like, will what those people talk about necessarily resonate? Do I still like use all those people now as for guidance? No. But at the time, it sure got me thinking, right? And it got me into that like mindset of, and then like I could start to like narrow down. But yeah, you gotta just get ready to take the bull by the horns and like get ready to work hard and get ready to learn and just start problem solving.
Yeah,
huge.
I think that's like
huge.
Like it's like really inspirational to hear, because I know like working for you for a couple of years now, I've seen like, you're like, you need to check out this person. I'm learning so much through them. And it's always been really inspirational to like see how much work you do with your business.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I think that it comes back to, I guess, maybe like being more of like a mature teacher, and how it would be kind of hard if you're like a brand new teacher and you're just still trying to like figure out how to teach yoga and like what your style is. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to learn that mm-hmm. while running a business with no business background. And then you've got all that to learn too. I feel mm-hmm. like that's kind of like a pretty good case for, you know, establish yourself as a teacher, do as much as you can, totally. Like learning that way. And then when you're ready for something totally. More, step into the business side of it.
Yeah, big time, big time. That's kind of like, you know, most studios fail because the business side is just not there. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just not there. And, you know, when it comes down to like business side, it's like, you either going to figure it out yourself, or you're going to like hire someone to do it for you. And if you can't afford to hire someone to do it for you, and you can't figure it out yourself, then you're just circling the toilet. It's going to end eventually.
Yeah. Well, you'll run yourself into the ground, right? Like, both,
that's
mentally and
you're going to burn it out. Absolutely. Like my prior business partner could not make those distinctions and didn't have those skills. And so basically, and also couldn't delegate, and also was, like a control freak. And so in the end, the quality of the teaching went down super low, and the business, failed too. So, it's a very challenging, interesting thing, right? And because of what we're doing is yoga, it's different. It's different. Like this is relationship and like human development and personal development and all the stuff that comes up in people when we're on that pathway. So everything's a little bit more loaded. Right? It's not like we're selling cotton candy at like the amusement park, and all we got to figure out is like, should we put in more sugar in the machine and get like fancier sticks to put the cotton candy on? Like
it blue or pink or purple.
Exactly. Like, because should it be sweeter, or should we get one more flavor? Like, it's not that simple. There's a real thick human component, right? It's not like we're just like shipping stuff out the door that's like a commodified good. This is service, right? So wild.
Yeah, service is definitely interesting than like product. Like product, it's so much easier to kind of like streamline that process and make sure that it's like the same every time. Service is like a whole different sort of ball game.
Yeah, this is like the service of like a human serving another, trying to fulfill a need that is like in their lives that for some of them is really big and important. And like, obviously, we all come to yoga for different reasons, but for some folks, and I love working with these students, like the reasons are so noble and big, right? And then you have business mixed in behind all that you got to like set it up to shore up the foundation.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
And so in terms of owning a yoga studio in a small town, what you kind of said, like, having a big recreational center come in and be like, we're going to offer all these services much cheaper and try and shut down all these small businesses. That was obviously a massive challenge. But what other challenges do you guys face specifically to being a studio in a small town?
Well, we'll say like the whole community center thing, like that eventually turned into like this whole year-long thing where we actually, a whole host of various private fitness businesses had to come together and form a lobby group and like venture forth and communicate with town administration, communicate with our town councilors the value of what we provided, illuminating people on that, and then getting people to recognize that we're like an integral part of the cultural makeup of Canmore, and then like working some sort of policies. But rewinding back to your question, like what are some challenges in a small town? I think every small town's different. But like Canmore, one of the things we are challenged with is transiency. Some people are fortunate enough to be in Canmore for a really, really long time. Other people are there for not as long of a time. And so like student turnover, can be, that can be kind of tough, right? Like I've lost students because they've had to move for this, that, and the other. And they're all like good reasons. Like if they're trying to like, their life direction pulls them a certain way. But, small town, I think that's one. Another thing with small town, I think this is a challenge, but is also a privilege running a small business, especially something as service-oriented as a yoga studio, is that you really are in the public eye. Like you're right out there. I remember when we came over and took over the studio, within like a year, I'd be walking down Main Street or just walking down any street, and I'd run into people and I'd say hi, right? Because they knew me and I knew them. And I was with this one guy, and he'd be like, man, I've lived here in Canmore for 5 years, and I have nowhere near the sense of community that you have. Mm-hmm. And that's because he works at home, right? Whereas, I'm so blessed to be in front of people and I'm in that community, right? And so there you are. On the flip side of that, it's like you're in community, like all the time. And so anonymity, which some people really prize, is not going to happen, in a small town. It's just not going to happen. Like, there's times where, you know, if I've got to like get something done, you know, I'm going to pick off hours. Like, when do I buy my groceries? A lot of times, Saturday night, 10:30 p.m. Right? Right. But you know, but there's other times where, like, if I'm feeling kind of lonely or I'm just got some hours to kill, I'm just going to go downtown and, like, you know, I'll take care of this one chore. I'll bring Clara along or Paige along, and like along the way, it's just like, this is my neighborhood, this is my town, and like I'll bump into someone and we'll talk for a bit, and then we'll like go like 100 feet down the street, and then like, hey, how's it going? Like I'll step in and say hi to someone, or they'll come out and say hi, and Clara's like, can we go? This is taking forever. Right? You know, that you know, and so you know, it is a blessing too.
Yeah, that's definitely like a pro and a con for sure. There's two sides to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, I think in a small town, how you run yourself as a business, that's magnified your conduct, right? Like, I think in the city, especially like the bigger cities like Vancouver and Calgary, there's some pretty despicable stuff going on in the yoga world, how, like, you know, certain things are happening, or even like across business. But when you're in a small town, like, you can't run off of this ethic of, you know what, screw them, because that's going to come around and get back to you, mm-hmm. right? And deservedly so, because like in a small town, like, you know, we've always tried to treat people as well as we could, and I think that's one of the reasons why the studio is successful. And like, if there's other people out there, you know, they run by the credo, you know, may the bridges I burn light my way, and it's not going to happen.
Not a very good way to live your life.
No. And in a small town, that is highly magnified. Like, you can get away with that to a degree in the city, but eventually it's going to be knives out, right? You're going to burn enough people that eventually it's going to, yeah. And also, like, I would question, if you're the kind of person that likes to burn people, like, like, I don't know if you should be in the yoga business.
Right.
Yeah. What are some other challenges? I think those are some of the bigger ones. I also think, depending on the small town that you're in, is like introducing concepts that may be different or foreign. Canmore is a very progressive place, and there's a thirst for learning. And so, like, at the lounge, when we bring ideas in, we haven't really necessarily like run into that. But, you know, like, I think in other places, in a smaller community, if you're bringing something in that like totally rocks the social norm, that could be tough to like understand, for sure.
Yeah.
But we're pretty lucky that way.
Like, is that in terms of like workshops or like people that you bring in as guest teachers, or is that more like things that you might introduce in your class?
Well, it could be like perspectives or like mentality or like, you know, spiritual components, like all that stuff, you know, depending on what your community is like. There could be a thirst and a zest and a zeal for that. It might not be there yet, and you have to like foster that, or maybe it's like people aren't into it, right? Because, like, you know, like sometimes small towns, things take a time to change. Mm-hmm. Canmore, I find, is like pretty darn receptive. Like, we're blessed that way. But, you know, there's other places where, you know, not the same. Yeah. I think the other thing that really helped for us is that the Yoga Lounge has been around since 2002. Like, we did not open the Yoga Lounge, right? Candace Naller, the cook, started the Yoga Lounge, and Nicole Beaudry did a fantastic job running the Yoga Lounge, and so we're like the third people to run it. So there's like a history there, and there's like a loyalty there. And so if you're an initial business within a small town, then I think there's a lot of loyalty and goodwill for that. I think breaking into a small town market, like if all of a sudden you're going to like muscle into some small town and, you know, there's like another yoga studio there, you're like, well, we're going to open our studio, you know, and we're like, you know what, it's probably not going to work. It's going to be an uphill battle, right?
Right.
People, right, there, you know, there's a relationship that's already been built. Right, especially if like the prior studios, you know, doing things right and valuing those relationships and treating people as well as they can.
Yeah, that's definitely
that relationship
something.
Is there.
sorry. I was going to say that's something to consider as like somebody who's looking to open a studio. It's like if you look at a market and you're like, oh, well, there's like 15,000 people in this place, but there's only like, you know, one or two studios. Like there's probably definitely room for another studio, but actually like looking deeper into the market. Cause I feel like people in small towns are really like more so than city people. They're like dedicated to their studio.
Absolutely right. Especially if that studio is established and they're responsive to the needs of their students. Yeah, man, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work. Like if you're going to do the exact same thing, it's not going to work. It's you gotta
offer something different.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know if I could offer like a hard number on like, you know, how many people per like area for a given studio. From my personal experience, I would say like a viable studio in a small town, at least from what I've seen in Canada. By like a viable studio, I mean something that can be around for the long term. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes like a population of like 13 to 15,000 to make like one studio truly viable.
Right.
So yeah, so if you're like in a town that has like 8,000 people and there's one studio there, like opening a second studio there is probably offering the same thing. It's probably not gonna. I don't know. I just don't like. I feel it's the wrong approach.
Yeah, I think it's important to like look at the like. I was going to say space, but maybe just like looking at the people and the industry. Like if I think about my knowledge of the yoga lounge, like there's people that are so dedicated to the yoga lounge, like they would not leave for another yoga studio. Like they probably wouldn't even go try it because it's like they're happy with what like they're getting there. Like they're like, we don't need another yoga studio. So it's like really important to understand the market that you're going to open a business in and like understand the people within that market.
Totally. And Canmore is also blessed that we're also like a destination town. So we also have like traffic from people that visit, right? And so like honestly, the number might be like for 15,000 people, bare minimum for like a studio to like run. And that's also like a studio running at the highest level where, you know, the owners are incredibly engaged, like the business model's strong. There's like a desire to like work with like constantly finger on the pulse, like not like a business that someone puts on automatic and just hopes it like rolls along. Like that's like a highly engaged. So yeah, maybe like 15,000 would be like what is sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I know these this is all conjecture, but I can only talk from like personal experience. And that's for small town. Like in the city, it might even have to be bigger.
Right.
Just because there's just so much. Right. There's so much. Like I look at like Calgary with like just like over 1 million people, and there's I don't know how many studios there are. I know there's lots closing. Right.
There must be like at least 20 yoga studios, eh?
Probably 20 that actually like work. And you know, this is actually something that if someone is like really curious about is like, yeah, pick a city, say Toronto, right? Look at the circular map of that area, count the number of studios that are viable, that have been around, and by viable, they've been around at least 5 years. Divide that by the population, and then that might start giving you like a bit of an index. Okay, big metropolis area, you need, for that kind of metropolis, you need like 80,000 people. Like it takes 80,000 people to sustain a studio, because obviously not 80,000 people are going to go there, but you know, blah, 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 blah. So some interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's definitely something to consider for people who are like
for sure
thinking about opening a studio or considering that.
Yeah, which like it just blows me away, right? Like when I hear of like people opening studios in Calgary still, and they're like opening them in like areas that already have a lot of studios. I'm like, wow, you're like setting yourself up like with like
challenge, a lifetime of challenge.
Yeah, like, exactly, for sure. But I think we talked about that in the first podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to be mindful of your time. Is there anything else that you want to share about your experience as a teacher and a studio owner? I mean, there's probably so much, but just kind of along the lines of this topic.
Sure. Well, I think as a studio owner, as a business owner, what happens is like the buck stops with you. Like eventually you're the backstop on everything, right? And you gotta either love it and accept that fact, or just realize that it's going to be something really frustrating. Like, because I'm the owner, right? So it is my job to care, right? Mm-hmm. So like crazy situations that, you know, come up with students, or challenging things that come up with teachers, right? The big stuff, you can't pass that off to someone else down the line. So like eventually, like, you have to make a call or be in some interesting situation and deal with it. You know, so if I'm walking down if I'm walking into the studio and there's like a bunch of garbage lying on the ground, like, I don't walk by that. I got to pick that up, right? Because this is my place. This is my, where, you know, if you don't own it, you're like, wow, it's just like a bit of garbage on the ground. You know, I care. This is my place, right? And so, when you take on that mantle, there's a lot to do, right? Like the biggest decisions, the hardest decisions will naturally come your way, and you have to take those on. You got to be willing to take those on, and that's just part of ownership. And if you can see that as an opportunity to grow as a person and to learn a lot about who you are, and you can like accept those hardships, amazing, right? You're in the right thing. They're the sort of things that are going to be really hard for you. And, you know, you're allowed to complain, like, for sure. Like, how many times have I been at the yoga lounge with a plunger in my hand trying to unclog a toilet because someone, like, decided to, like, flush, you know, I can't even talk about it. Or, like, you know, someone decided, like, take their, like, Starbucks with, like, the loose tea leaves and just, rather than, you know, put in the garbage, I'll just pour the tea leaves down the drain. So it'll clog, you know, just like, you know, the times I've been on my knees, like, dealing with, like, shit, like, literal or figurative, there's been a lot. Right? Like, and there's times I've put in, like, mega hours. Like, we just did a studio reno, right? And I was there at 1:30 in the morning, putting in curtains. It's like 1:30 in the morning. The kids have been in bed for hours. Everyone else in town, except for a small handful of people, are asleep, many hours into sleep. And I'm there with like a measuring tape and like a level, trying to figure out how to put in curtains. Yeah. But, yeah, so it's you gotta get ready to take it on. But you know what? At the same time, if it goes well and the community thrives, it is so great. It is super sweet and rewarding, because you lay down a bedrock of some great things to happen. And it's like stewardship, and it's custodianship, and it's guardianship, and yeah, it's rad.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thank you for that. And if anyone is in the Canmore area passing through in like the summer over Christmas holidays, definitely go check out the Yoga Lounge. I'll put links for the Yoga Lounge and as well as your personal website, Jeff, on the show notes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Where else are you teaching at any upcoming festivals, workshops, events?
What's coming up on the pipe? I haven't had a chance to update my website in a while because I've been so busy like working on the Yoga Lounge. But like, let me see. I just came off of 2 workshops in Calgary. I will be teaching on the solstice, December 21st, Calgary. December 21st, 2016, up at the top of the Calgary Tower.
What? That's so badass.
Oh, it'll be super awesome. And so that'll be an amazing way. Those of you guys in the Calgary area looking for like a kick-ass solstice event, it'll be super memorable. We'll be up on the tower, way up high, and we'll be doing yoga. Other things coming up, I'll be in Whitehorse, teaching up in the Yukon in May. There's also Banff Yoga Festival that is happening in March March or April, I think, of 2017. So that will be another thing that people...
I think it's the end of May, isn't it?
Sorry, yep, May 2017. My bad. Yeah, and
I just interviewed Kaylee, that's why I know.
Yeah, right. Well, like last year was the first version of the Banff Yoga Festival. It was a fantastic festival. There will probably be some other stuff coming down the pipe as well. And yeah, that's the stuff right off the top of my head. But really, like the best place to catch me, if you're like most readily, check me out at the Yoga Lounge. My schedule's there, and I am there very, very, very consistently because it's my home.
Amazing, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jeff.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Amanda. So great.
All right. So I hope that everyone really enjoyed that interview. I know that it was so much fun for me to record. So hopefully everyone got a lot of valuable information from it. To find out more, you can visit the show notes at mbomyoga.com. You can learn more about the Yoga Lounge at www.theyogalounge.ca and about Jeff Ma's personal brand at jeffma.com. There'll be links for all of that on the show notes though. And just a quick reminder that we still have the promotion going on with Ceteris. Ceteris is a cloud-based accounting and bookkeeping program, and they're offering a really cool promotion for yoga studio owners and people in the fitness industry where you get your first 3 months with no strings attached for free. And you can find more about that at MBOM Yoga on the show notes for this episode, as well as on the episode for Levi Morehouse. And you can join the community on Facebook at facebook.com/mastering the business of yoga. Same handle on Instagram. So instagram.com/mastering the business of yoga. You can join the newsletter and be the first person to know about new episodes, new blog posts, and everything that's going on with MBOM at mbomyoga.com/newsletter. And as always, thanks so much for listening and namaste.